When people mention SNK, there is no denying that at least one person would bring up Metal Slug. Metal Slug is agreed to be one of SNK's popular and iconic games, among other titles such as King of Fighters, Fatal Fury, and Samurai Showdown. With its amazing graphics, tight controls, and simple gameplay, it's hard to dislike the game. Don't get me wrong, Metal Slug isn't the perfect game, but it does so many things right that it has been given positive reviews throughout the years. It's even considered to be one of the best run-and-gun games ever made, considered as a must-play, something to try at least once in your gaming life. And I agree with them. Welcome to my retrospective of Metal Slug. For this video, we will be talking about the first entry in the series. Metal Slug was developed by the Nazca Corporation, a Japanese game dev company formed by some of the members of IREM. They were acquired by SNK in 1996, and through SNK, the game was published and released on April 18 the same year. The game's full title is Metal Slug Super Vehicle 001, but most commonly referred to the series as Metal Slug. For the purpose of this retrospective, I'll be using the same naming convention. The game was originally released for the Neo Geo arcade machines and home consoles, but thanks to the game's popularity and success, it has been ported to multiple platforms throughout the years. For this video, we'll be looking at the Japan-only PS1 port. We'll be using this version for the following reasons. This is the version of the game I physically have available on me. I want to talk about combat skill and another story, and though admittedly selfish of me, I just have more memories and attachment to this version. Now the first game isn't my entry to the series. My first Metal Slug game was actually Metal Slug X, an updated version of Metal Slug 2. Long story short, my brother and I played Metal Slug X until he decided to bust out our copy of Metal Slug. Now, I don't mean to sound like an idiot, but I've been playing this game for so many years that it was only a year ago that I learned the game had plot. To be fair, the game's story is very simple, and by playing the game, you can get a good grasp of it. The year is 2028, and the game's main antagonist, General Morden, has launched a rebellion against the world's governments. Most of the country's attempts to stop him has failed, leading to him gaining access to the Metal Slug, an all-terrain combat tank. Now, Marco Rossi and Tarmo Roving, members of the Peregrine Falcon Squad, are tasked with locating and destroying Morden's base, while reclaiming or destroying any Metal Slug found along the way. Let's talk about gameplay. Metal Slug, as mentioned before, is a run-and-gun game. Basically, you go from the start to the end of a level while destroying anything that gets in your way. There are, in my perspective, two main game elements or mechanics in Metal Slug. Number 1, playing the character on foot, and number 2, playing while inside the Metal Slug. While on foot, you have the standard movements via the D-pad, and you can jump by pressing the X button. You shoot your gun by pressing the square button, and you throw your grenades by pressing the circle button. You can also aim your shots upward or downward with the respective D-pad buttons. You're also very squishy, meaning you die in one hit. It's not really a big deal since most of the enemies also die in one hit. That is until you encounter enemy machines like tanks or fighter planes, which can take more damage. To balance things out, the game gives you items. You can get items by destroying crates or by saving prisoners of war, long-bearded men that are captured by the enemy. More on them later. Items are either special weapons or additional grenades. There are 4 special weapons for this game.
Heavy machine gun, rocket launcher, flame shot, shotgun.
They provide better firepower but have limited ammo. This is in direct contrast to the default weapon, the handgun, which has infinite ammo, an average fire rate, and poor firepower. When the ammo for your special weapon runs out, it is immediately replaced by the handgun, so you also need to conserve special weapon ammo. You can also do melee attacks when you get close to an enemy. Melee attacks kill enemy soldiers, but don't do much damage to mechanical units. While inside the Metal Slug, things aren't vastly different. For starters, the controls are still similar to when you move on foot. However, the tank uses a different arsenal from your character. The main weapon is a rifle cannon with infinite ammo, which you fire with the square button. And for grenades, you have the Vulcan cannon, which can be used by pressing the circle button. You can also sacrifice the vehicle by doing a kamikaze attack. This is done by simultaneously pressing the X and square button. The tank can also take more damage. It can take up to 3 hits before exploding, so you still have to make sure you don't get hit. In the event that you do get hit, you can pick up fuel along the way. This is your tank's medkit, and it will restore the vehicle to full health. Now, there are no special weapons for the tank, but whenever you pick up grenade ammo as the tank, it adds ammo for your Vulcan cannon instead. If you want to vacate the vehicle, simply hold down the down button and press X to jump out of it. Conveniently, you can hold the down button and press circle to throw any grenades your character has. Despite being the only usable vehicle in the game, I personally think the Metal Slug is a solid vehicle. However, do you really know what I find amazing about the tank? Number 1, it can jump by itself. I'm not updated how technology advanced tanks are, but I think they still need to go off ramps to jump. Imagine having a tank and just leaps at you. Number 2, ever noticed that it's manned by a single person? As far as I know, most tanks have a crew of around 3 to 4 people with their respective roles and duties. I just really find it amusing that it was designed to contain a single person, not a crew. To be fair, I don't think it even has capacity for another person, and I won't be amazed if this is the reason why metal slugs are really important in the context of the game. And number 3, it has a self-destruct button. Again, I'm not sure if such a thing even exists today, but as mentioned earlier, you can say damn it all and do a tank kamikaze attack. Okay. Enough gushing about the tank. Let's continue on with the other gameplay elements. Earlier, I brought up the prisoners of war. Aside as being the game's catalyst for item provisioning, they also serve as points. If you look to the bottom left of the screen, there's a stickman that you get for saving a prisoner of war. The game records the prisoner of war you save, and at the end of every level, their names are listed and then added to your points. However, if you die while having a list of prisoners of war, that list is gone and you don't get the additional points. It's an added challenge and a test of how well you can play the game, something that I've only thought of recently. Also, let me mention that I really appreciate the developers for giving a name for all the prisoners of war. It makes them seem more alive and not just a glorified gift basket. Before I continue, let me mention the controls real quick. The controls are really responsive and they feel natural. The characters immediately respond to the press input, and there was not one moment in the whole time that I've played this game where I felt like I made a mistake because the controls were janky. The characters aren't floaty, and you just have enough control that it isn't too tight. The same can be said when you play the tank. Just don't do what I did back then and roll my thumb all over the buttons. I accidentally triggered the tank self-destruct button one time by doing this, and that session didn't end well. Now let's talk about the levels. There are 6 levels, or missions as the game calls them. They last about 2 to 4 minutes each, and at the end of the level is a boss fight with a huge machine. The missions themselves are really varied when compared to each other. Mission 1 is the Villeneuve Mountain System. It's a jungle area with some rivers to cross and a gorgeous waterfall at the end of the stage. It is a good starting level as it does its job really well. It spawns you in a place where you can learn the controls, and it spawns an enemy for you to test out your default weapon. It's a simple left-to-right level with some basic platforms for you to traverse. The level also lets you use a metal slug, and the remaining parts and enemies of the level from that point gives you enough time to get comfortable with the vehicle. This level also gives you the tropical war vibe similar to Vietnam War movies. Mission 2 is Ronbertburg City, and there's a lot to talk about it. For starters, the level has 4 sections. We have a train station occupied by the rebel army. Then we have this bridge over water with a background that looks so bizarre. When you reach that part where the enemies destroy the bridge, there's this broken Big Ben-like tower in the background and some buildings in front of it. Then, on the foreground where you're walking, there's this bar and restaurant that can only be entered by a boat. After that section, you get to fight this mini-boss, which I think is really out of place since there are only a few parts left of the level. I'm led to believe that it's just there so that the level has a reason to change music, from the catchy jazz to dangerous mission music. After that, you have this wooden slope with a locked camera section for a forced fight. Like the mini-boss, I think it's out of place, but hey, at least you get a metal slug. Then finally, there's the boss section. In terms of scope, this level is probably the biggest, but it isn't the longest. The award goes to Mission 6, but we'll get to that later. Mission 3 is Cape Hurt Village, a snow-covered cliff with a small rebel base. This level has the most vertical design, and this makes it really interesting and the most unique compared to the others. You start with climbing the side of this cliff. At the top, you get to fight the mini-boss Alan O'Neill, an elite soldier of the rebel army who is immortal if the sequels are to be believed. Now, unlike the mini-boss in Mission 2, this one doesn't feel out of place. It's after a long climb and gives you a good change of pace, and after the mini-boss, there's still more to the level. Anyways, after the mini-boss, you get to the entrance area of the rebel base. As expected, a lot of soldiers and tanks are in there, but what is funny about the rebel base is that there's this huge barrel of explosives that is conveniently placed in the middle of it all. You walk out of the destroyed rebel base, and after a snow-covered forest section, you get the boss fight. Mission 4 is Death Valley, a deserted and damaged town heavily occupied by the rebels. Now, the level name is really freaking accurate and wears it like a badge. You start the level surrounded by a bunch of destroyed buildings, giving this haunting feeling to the area. You break into the wrecked saloon, and past this is an area surrounded by a huge cliff. From here, the enemy seems to have pulled all the stops. You have tanks on top of the cliffs ready to fall on you. There are numerous trenches along the way for the enemy to hide in. Heck, they even made these small towers with cannons on them just to impede your movement. However, the level isn't that long, and after all this, you get a boss fight with 2 tanks. Mission 5 is Gerhard City, a city besieged by the enemy. I personally think this is the most boring level in terms of design, especially considering what we've been through so far. For starters, this is just another occupied city, and it's a very straightforward level. I also believe this to be the shortest level in the game. Now don't get me wrong, the level is gorgeous in its own right, and is able to somewhat stand out compared to the other levels. But there really isn't much going for it. For example, the only set piece that I can think of are the following. Number 1. If you destroy the buildings, the citizens exit them. Now the problem is that there are so many destructibles in the other levels with their own effects and responses, so this isn't the first time we've encountered something like this. And number 2, the animals that are running away from the boss level. It's unique. It isn't done by any other levels. Yeah. Anyways, you basically traverse the city, getting over the obstacles like the cars in the way or the barricades the enemies put up. Then you reach the boss. That's about it. Finally, Mission 6, called the Straits of Traven. Like I mentioned earlier, this is the longest mission in the game. Most of the enemy types in the game can be found here, and they are relentless. Basically, you're trying to reach the enemy's main base and square off against Morden. You start with this bridge section that gets destroyed by the man himself wielding a bazooka while in a copter. From there, you land on a boat which you use to cross the strait. Now, it's not smooth sailing as enemies will either drop in or use the remaining parts of the bridge to act as a barrier. You finally land on the island, and after some last-minute cannon fodder confrontation, you finally fight Morden. Now, however long the last mission may be, it just feels epic. It certainly gives off this feeling of accomplishment for getting this far as well as a sense of finality. With the levels out of the way, it's now time for the bosses. As I've mentioned briefly, they are machines that you fight at the end of each level. What I failed to mention is that they are big, they are able to soak up a lot of damage, and have a huge arsenal of weapons at their disposal. The first boss is the Tetsuyuki, a giant warship that has crash-landed to a waterfall and has since been acting as a makeshift base for the enemy. This is the standard non-moving boss. As the first boss of the game, it does its job really well. The boss is able to teach the main aspects of the game's boss, which is being huge, being a damage sponge, and having a lot of weapons on hand. It has a laser cannon that shoots forward. For the majority of the time, though, it will fire bursts of arcing energy shots, which are actually really easy to dodge. The second boss is the Hairbuster Ryberts, a heavy bomber aircraft. This boss comes with a guided missile that is aimed at your character's vertical position, as well as this annoying bouncing bombs that are so many and bounce in random directions. This is also where you'll get your first look at Morden, because at random times, the cabinet the Hairbuster will open, showing Morden with a bazooka and will fire rockets from it. The third boss is the Tanio, a heavy artillery tank that hangs out below the character's platform. It has 2 huge cannons that will aim at your character before firing. It has 2 turrets on the side which either fires landmines or the miniguns. For most of the time, it will use the landmines to obstruct their movement. The landmines are really easy to destroy though, and you can destroy them before they even land on the ground. The miniguns is what you have to watch out for as they can catch you off guard. They shoot at the ground from the sides and move to the center. The fourth boss R. Yes, R. Shu and Karn, my least favorite Terran boss, not because of the difficulty, but because of how boring they look and play compared to the other Terran bosses. They are literally 2 tanks, one on the top platform and one on the bottom platform. Most of the time, they use the missile launchers on their back to attack the player, though if you are directly in front of them, they will instead use their main cannon or the 2 sub-cannons. Sometimes the hatches of the tanks will open and a rebel soldier will pop out and use their weapons to help defend the tank from the player. Considering that we've fought multiple tanks up to this point, this boss just leaves more to be desired. The fact that there are 2 of them in the boss fight just solidifies my points in my opinion. The fifth boss is the Iron Nokana, probably my favorite boss in the game. The boss has more weapons compared to the others. Unlike the previous bosses, this one sports a red color, definitely standing out from the previous encounters. This seems like a giant armored truck modified for combat. It has a cannon on front that fires arc energy shots like the Tetsuyuki. It has a hidden flamethrower at the bottom, which is deployed when the boss rises up. When the flamethrower is destroyed, the boss will stay risen and prisoners of war will drop below it. It will then start to spam its rocket launcher turrets. Let's not forget the tank on its back for that added firepower. The final boss is the Hidu, which is the aircraft Morden is riding. Now, if Shu and Karn is my least favorite Terran boss, then this is definitely my least favorite aircraft boss. Like Shu and Karn, my dislike stems from the design. how boring it looks in place compared to the other aircrafts. Yes, it has more firepower compared to the other flying enemies, but it is literally a helicopter whose main purpose is to carry more than while he fights you. Anyways, the Hido isn't entirely useless as it's equipped with a bunch of weapons, but at this point it isn't something you haven't seen yet. It has a minigun that fires from right to left, missiles that launch from the front, and the capability to carpet bomb the player. Probably the only thing interesting about it. Of course, you also have Morden, who is shooting his bazooka at the player, similar to the boss fight with the Hairbuster. It's definitely the most challenging boss out of all the 6, since there is little to no breathing room when the copter actually does something. But the fight isn't impossible. With the levels and bosses out of the way, time to talk about the graphics. Now, no matter how much negative feedback I mention about a level or a boss, make no mistake. The pixel art and animations in this game are freaking amazing. From what I've researched, the animations are hand-drawn, and as a guy who does pixel art sometimes on the side, the amount of work with the graphics just sends shivers down my spine. Kudos to the graphics and animation team who made this game because the aesthetics have definitely stood the test of time. These are definitely one of the main defining features of this game and the series. The graphics still look great either on an old CRT TV or on a modern one. The animations are so fluid, everything is framed or timed correctly. The idle animations are really funny and unique to each unit, giving the characters personality and life. Everything is telegraphed so well, like when an enemy is going to make an attack, or when you are going to make your own moves. I know that some people on the internet jokingly say this game and most SNK games are pixel art porn, but I could literally stare at all of this all day and not get tired looking. Also, let's talk about the artwork for a second. Now, the pixel art isn't the only thing that is aesthetically pleasing in terms of graphical design. If you take the time to look at the artworks, you'll be able to see the characters or any units in the game, and damn! It's really amazing and interesting to see how some of the in-game sprites look like before they were translated into the game. Like, for example, the artwork of the Tetsuyuki, or the player characters Marco and Tarma. They aren't being lazy about it too, since they show us that they can do amazing art in multiple styles. What about the music? Well, first off, the music is amazing and has reached an iconic status. There's nothing more iconic in this game than the announcer that goes,
Heavy machine gun,
or
rocket launcher.
There are also some tracks that have become synonymous with Metal Slug, like the background music for Mission 6, or the theme that plays at the end of each level. However, the songs can be a bit of a one-track mind. For example, there are songs that almost sound similar just because of the theme they were going for. However, that doesn't mean they can't do any funky things, like, for example, Mission 2's music. It isn't the standard This Is War music, but this jazz-like sound and composition. I hope you don't get sick of the music because some of the tracks get reused in the sequels. We'll get to that when we get to that. At this point, I've talked about the base game. Now let's talk about the additional modes the PS1 port has. First off, we have the Combat School mode. Now I think it's worth mentioning that if you have a Neo Geo CD version or the Sega Saturn version, they also have this mode as well. This mode lets you replay the game with a different set of rules. To be able to play this mode, you need to at least have finished Mission 1 and created an officer profile. The officer profile will serve as your profile for the whole game mode. Now, sadly, the creation of the officer profile doesn't mean you get a custom sprite. You still get to use Marco for player 1 and Tarma for player 2. Now, with all said and done, you get to choose between pinpoint attack or survival. In pinpoint attack, your aim is to finish the level as fast as you can, similar to a time trial. You can die, but dying will definitely cost you some time. The rules for this mode are as follows. The player has 3 lives, but no credits, so if you lose those lives, the mission is over. Special weapons have infinite ammo, but not for grenades. The Metal Slug dies in 1 hit, and the timer stops when cinematic events are running but not for deaths. In survival, the name explains it all. Finish the mission in 1 life. Dying means the end of the run. Also, instead of a timer, the game records how far you were able to get during the survival run. There are also these rules. Special weapons again have infinite ammo but not for grenades. The player carries their special weapons and grenade ammo to the next mission. And there are no Metal Slugs. Finishing a run in any of the 2 increases the player's rank, which is the main point of Combat School. The higher the rank, the more impressive the instructor is, and some dialogue changes happen per rank. The end goal is to reach the Super Devil rank, which you can obtain by reaching 1000 points. Super Devil rank unlocks the Super Devil mode, which is the easy mode for the Combat School. In this mode, the player has green skin, and the default weapon ammo is changed to the Metal Slug cannon. As great as this sounds, picking up a special weapon will change your default weapon. So if you really love that Metal Slug cannon gun, don't pick up any special weapons. Sadly, when you unlock this mode, there's no way to revert to the standard mode. The only way to do that is to create another officer, which kinda sucks, because the game is basically telling you to start from scratch again after working so hard to get this. I think Combat School is an okay addition to the game. It does add some replayability to the game, though admittedly not by a lot. It's still the same 6 levels that you are playing, and at this point some of you might rather just replay arcade mode instead. What I will give it praise for is the addition of a challenge mode and new rules to the game. I understand that an argument can be made of how you really don't need Combat School to have challenge runs, and how you can just restrict yourself from some of the game's mechanics. Those arguments are perfectly fine and valid, but I think what Combat School does in that regard is that it provides its own rules in the event that the player currently has no starting point for a custom challenge run, and enforces it while giving the player the leeway to add more challenge to the game. For example, if you're doing a pinpoint attack run but you don't want to enter metal slugs, then the game allows you to do so. If you think the infinite ammo for special weapons in survival mode is dumb, then don't pick it up, and the game mode does not punish you for doing so. You can keep on doing it like this until you finally decide that, hey, I'll do this in the arcade mode now. The last game mode now to talk about is Another Story, a series of minigames that can be unlocked by finishing the main arcade mode. This is a mode that is only available in the PS1 port, and I am honestly confused as to why it is here. Another Story follows Captain Chris Keyes, a member of the regular army, with some regular army members disguised as prisoners of war. They're engaging in counteroffensives and escaping by themselves after realizing that Marco's army hasn't saved them after a week of captivity. Mission 1 is Find the Spy. You have to find the enemy who is disguised as a prisoner of war among 8 regular army prisoners of war. You do this by checking the salute animations of the prisoners of war. The game hints that the enemy's animation is stiffer than the usual one, since it doesn't know how to salute properly. This is a bit challenging on the first try, since they don't look so different at a glance. But this isn't something that is impossible. There is also a 99-second timer, which is enough for the minigame. Mission 2 is Escape with the Tank. You have to maneuver the regular army hiding behind a tank in a side-scrolling platform minigame and make them reach the end. You have to jump through bottomless pits as well as the enemy's reticule. You can afford to get hit twice. Getting hit twice means the mission ends, prompting for a restart. Mission 3 is Recognize the Technique. It's similar to Find the Ball in the Cup, where the cup are 4 prisoners of war, and the ball is a prisoner of war hiding within one of those 4 cups. Now at the start of the mode, there are 2 balls hiding, but at the third and final round, the hiding ball is reduced to 1. It's also a bit challenging, mostly because the cups move at different speeds and their sprites tend to overlap each other. Like the previous mission, you only have 2 chances to get this right, or it's a restart. Now, for some reason, there is a Mission 4, which you can't even play without finishing Another Story once. I find this baffling, because I see no reason to lock a minigame behind the completion of this mode. This means you are required to replay Another Story again, just so you can play Mission 4. So for the first run, you might be wondering what you get for finishing the mode. Basically, you get a different end credit scene wherein Mission 4 plays in the background, as well as a -1 version of the J-pop end credits music. I don't see the need to do this. Maybe I'm missing something here, but what's the point of hiding the full version of the song behind another playthrough of Another Story? Mission 4 is Dodge the Flame of War, wherein you need to get 8 prisoners of war safely across the field. Now you cross the field by going left to right while dodging the pipe bombs and plants that are being thrown in the field's direction. Picking up a bear will clear all obstacles. The only thing challenging about this game mode is that the prisoners of war move at specific distances when you press the D-pad. There is no free movement similar to the arcade mode, and holding the D-pad in this minigame just feels really weird thanks to the movement scheme. Now you might be wondering what you get for completing Another Story for the second time. Well, your reward, my dear player, is a different credit scene with a full version of the J-pop music lyrics and all. Nearly similar to the first one. Why? Just why? I mean, the background music does sound good, don't get me wrong, but did this really need to be behind the second playthrough? Did you really think it was a smart idea and a necessity to do this? This just screams artificial game length and arbitrary extension. Also, you get Another Story 2. What does Another Story 2 do? Nothing new, really. The only thing different is that you're playing Rumi Aikawa instead of Chris Keyes. Other than that, nothing new. Another Story seems like a late and rushed addition to the game to me. It doesn't contribute that much to the game in any way, unlike Combat School, which does affect how the base game plays to some extent. I don't want to sound like an idiotic, ungrateful person, but I really didn't see the need to add this game mode at all. I don't think it would have mattered in the long run, and I think the PS1 port would have been okay without it. To its credit, it is good if you want a change in pace, but at that point you'd probably be playing a different game instead. With all the modes tackled, are there anything else worth mentioning about the game? Well, there is one more thing which I think should be mentioned about the game. Now, this thing is very specific to the PS1 port, and it's the loading times. Sadly, this port of the game is full of loading times, and I'm not talking about the transition from level to level. While playing the levels, you will sometimes stop and the game loads the next portion of the level you're playing. Now, admittedly, I'm not that tech savvy when it comes to the PS1 and how it works, but I'm assuming this is because of the hardware limitations. I'm assuming this because when I was doing research for this video, I noticed that the Sega Saturn port didn't have in-level loading times. The only loading times I've seen was when you move from level to level. Now that all has been said and done, what is my final take on Metal Slug? I believe the game is great and a must-play for gamers out there. Yes, it might seem dated for some, and yes, it might have a quick game loop, but the amount of fun and replayability with the base game alone isn't something to scoff at. There is a reason why people have been giving this game high praises throughout the years. If you're interested in getting a copy of this game, then you are in luck because the game has been ported to many platforms. If you won't lose sleep from not being able to play the combat score or another story, then I suggest picking up the Metal Slug anthology for the PS2, PSP, and the Wii. The anthology comes with Metal Slugs 1 to 6 and are good ports and emulations of the base arcade games. If you just want the first game, then you can buy the game by itself for the PSP, PS3, and the Nintendo Switch. If you are more of a PC gamer, then you can pick this game up on Steam or GOG. However, if you really want to try the additional modes or maybe you're just a retro collector in general, then I would highly suggest getting a copy of this game for your respective retro system. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.